So, hello everybody, this is Bhante Joe here. Thought to record a short Dhamma discussion for the internet. So I thought that could start with just a little meditation, so we can lean forward a bit and arch the spine, and look about 3 feet in front, and close our eyes. And can focus in on the breath. Can know when it's coming in, and know when it's going out. And can focus in on the breath at the tip of the nose, trying to be aware of the breath all the way through the in-breath, as the in-breath turns to the out-breath, all the way through the out-breath, and as the out-breath turns back to the in-breath again. Trying to make mindfulness as continuous as possible. And can let awareness expand until it fills one's whole body. And one of the similes they give for this in the canon, spreading feelings throughout the body, is like a lake with an underground source. And the water comes up from the underground source and fills the whole lake. In the same way, one can let awareness spread until it fills the whole body. And with awareness filling the whole body, one can practice whole body breathing, being aware all the way through the in-breath, as the in-breath turns to the out-breath, all the way through the out-breath, and as the out-breath turns back to the in-breath again. Breathing in and out with the whole body. Imagining almost as if one could breathe through every pore. And before we finish meditating, can spread thoughts of goodwill, wishing may all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make the mind infinite, can make it unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every dimension. May all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. And can open our eyes and do a short Dhamma discussion for the internet. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. So I hope that everybody's having a great day wherever it might be. And was asked an interesting question the other day about what the difference was between Mano and Citta, and how to clarify the difference between those. And so in the canon, Mano gets used in combination with the word called Dhamma. It's the consciousness that arises dependent on the mind contacting ideas, or a Dhamma. They call Dhamma like ideas or a mental phenomenon. And as a result, this Mano Viññāna, or mental consciousness, arises. So Mano is the base. And Ñāṇadeepa Bhante had some insight into this. He described Mano as being not just the brain, but it can also include physical elements like the spine, other parts of the body that are involved with generating this base to perceive mental phenomena. Citta gets described as mind, so you can have a kind of enlarged Citta, shrunken Citta, kind of angry Citta, these various things. In the canon, it's also described as the thing that gets, they say, asavehi cittani vimucching suti, which means, it's a quote, it means their Cittas were released from the asavas, freed from the asavas. So it's also the mind, it uses the word mind, being described as something that's released from when the asavas are eliminated, when the outflows or defilements are eliminated. So both of these things, Mano and Citta, can be seen as basically being two aspects of the same thing. It's kind of, in general, the Buddha doesn't lay down specific, kind of like technical terms where he's trying to define all of reality. He had this, there was this famous simile where the Buddha was walking through a forest and he picked up some leaves that were on the forest floor, some simsampa leaves, which are apparently about the size of a dime. He picked up a handful of them. And he said, what do you think is more, bhikkhus, the leaves in my hand or the leaves in the trees overhead? And Bhikkhu said, of course, the leaves in the trees overhead are more. And the Buddha said, in the same way, what I've realized by direct knowledge is basically like the trees, in the leaves in the trees overhead. It's kind of, I know I've realized much more than what I've taught. What I've taught is what leads directly to unbinding, directly to nibbana. And he hasn't taught the rest because it doesn't. It isn't necessary to lead there. So what this means is that the Buddha's teachings are not something which tries to present an entire picture of reality. And so when one approaches the attempts to define the various terms that are used in the Pali Canon, one can try to do it to a certain extent, but after a certain point, it becomes a kind of it can become a kind of speculation. So, I mean, the citta is used in these various contexts, but in general it just means like the English word mind, is how it seems. So even the English word mind can be used in all these different ways in all these different contexts. Like even now, I was reading a while ago a book. Haven't read many secular books, or haven't read many books on kind of the brain and these kind of things for a while. But in this book, it was talking about the decade of the brain, which I can't remember when that was. I think it was last decade. And the author was saying he was looking forward to the decade of the mind. So it basically means is that even science doesn't have a clear idea of where the mind is, how it arises. There's debate around this thing that's called mind. And yet, when people use it in a context, then people immediately understand what it means. And so in the same way, when this word citta is used in these contexts, one can understand what it means. So the Buddha taught these things basically using just the handful of leaves. And so what that means is that in approaching these definitions that he gave, we approach them looking at them in the way that he wanted one to look at them. So in other words, trying to define what Mano and Citta is, it's, in their context, it's clear enough what it means. In the context that it's used in the canon, Mano basically means this base, and that's used to, that coupled with an external or an idea, allows one to have mind consciousness. And citta is basically just what we would use the word mind for in English, more or less, as far as I understand it. It basically means mind. It's kind of, if my mind is enlarged, it means more or less that one is practicing the Brahma-Viharas. If one's mind is scattered, it means that one is kind of all over the place. And to the extent, one could also find Mano in there. It's kind of, if one has a scattered mind, it means that one is the base is active and attending to all these various ideas, or allowing one to attend to all these various ideas. But both of these things are likely both aspects of a larger part of reality that the Buddha doesn't describe fully. So in other words, when one approaches these definitions, one wants to observe them in the context that they're given in the canon. So Mano in the canon and Citta in the canon are basically both used as aspects of teaching. And kind of one uses Mano to contemplate that mind consciousness, the consciousness that arises through the mind, what it is that's aware of ideas, that's aware of these things, is dependent on a base and on an idea. And kind of it's dependent on these various things. As a result, consciousness arises. Based on a Dhamma or phenomenon, some kind of mental phenomenon. And so these things are impermanent, and this is what allows one to develop dispassion towards the mind. And similarly, when one contemplates the word citta, or uses the word citta in the canon, it's used to mean mind. It's basically often the Buddha is trying to describe what to develop, and kind of develop the heightened mind. And kind of, I think it's the adicitta. Adicitta means like heightened mind where one is developing the jhanas. Or if one knows a scattered mind, it's described in the Satipatthanas, one wants to know if one's mind is scattered or unscattered, basically to the idea being, in many cases, to make it unscattered, to bring the mind to higher states. If a mind is constricted, if a mind is angry, whatever it is, one wants to change that mind to bring it to a more positive thing. And one wants to, if one is contemplating on the way he uses the word citta and being released from the asavas, then this is something that one wants to learn to experience. One wants to have this experience oneself of the mind being released from the asavas. But as far as the exact definition of what these things are, it's something that the Buddha didn't provide an entire picture of. So I was told one time Ajahn Thanissaro had a good, was told one time Ajahn Thanissaro had this good description of the difference between Western and Eastern philosophy, which was that Western philosophy is based on the eye, kind of wants to find out what's really real, what's out there, kind of what it is that's seen, and kind of what is it that we can know. So in other words, oftentimes when one approaches the Buddha's teachings, it can be useful to try to approach it from this perspective of seeing which elements of reality he described. But when one approaches it from this perspective, there's these gaps. And kind of citta, mano, they overlap. But Indian philosophy was more concerned with finding a permanent source of food. So in other words, what is it that when one consumes, it makes one a being, gives rise to increased becoming, gives rise to birth, aging, and death, and how it is that one finds a need not to feed on anything at all, so that one can be independent. When one approaches these terms, Mano, Citta, whatever definitions in the canon there might be, their use becomes much more clear. Although the entire picture isn't something the Buddha described and is something that many could speculate on, when one reads it in the canon, their use becomes clear as a means for the Buddha's way of trying to find an end to the need to feed, an end to the need for food. And kind of one is attached to the mind and ideas. One is attached to these various ways and modes that the mind might come about. And being attached to it, one becomes something. Becoming something, one creates the conditions for further birth. So in describing these terms, Citta and Mano, it's essentially to develop dispassion. It's to develop the heightened states of mind with Citta that he wants us to have. It's to develop dispassion to the process of having mental objects with Mano, so that one can experience this asavehi chittani vimucching sutti, kind of this, this is for multiple people, but one can experience the mind being released from the asavas. So this is the Buddha's reason that he gives just this handful of leaves. It's to try to point this way to finding an end to food, an end to the need to feed, mental food, physical food, trying to find an end to the need for being reborn. And the end of this need is the ending of craving. So one learns to apply these concepts, these terms, in the ways that he taught, and leaving the larger picture aside, because it's in the leaves and the trees up above. And so it's something that one can speculate on, something that one can try to divide, but it isn't something that the Buddha directly described. So what it means is that we use what he did directly describe to try to find this end to the need to feed. And this is when one could know directly for oneself that asavehi citta vimucching su. My Pali isn't good enough, but in any event, that one's mind is freed from the asavas. And in doing this in this way, using these terms in this way, one will have used them for the way, in the purpose, for the means that the Buddha wanted. And their meaning, their use, can become more clear when one experiences them oneself. So leave that for reflection, and hope that everybody has a great day wherever it might be, and wishing all the blessings of Dhamma practice. Pati Pati Saranai.